We've interviewed a lot of party leaders on this program over the years, but I'm not sure we've ever interviewed one the day after their first ever national election leaders debate. But we'll do that tonight with Annamie Paul, the leader of the Green Party of Canada, who's seeking personal election in Toronto Centre. And she joins us now from the national capital to talk about campaign 2021. Annamie Paul, it's good to have you back on TVO. How are you doing?
Great, and great to be back with you, Steve. You know, I always love your show.
I appreciate hearing that. How did you like the experience of participating in the leaders debate last night?
It was wonderful. It was bittersweet because on the one hand, it was great to have the opportunity to introduce myself to the people of Canada and to share our ideas for the future of the country. On the other hand, Steve, it was just, it was too short. We should have more debates. We should really give people the opportunity to get to know us. I don't see how you can talk about all of the issues that we did and do them any justice in the amount of time that we had.
Well, I don't say this because you are here, but I have really scoured a lot of the media accounts of last night. And I have to say this one's typical. I'll read this from Robin Urbach, who tweeted out, "It's too bad that the Greens spent the past few months punching themselves in the head because Annamie Paul is excellent in this debate, and it's really too bad they've squandered her." I'm not even sure what the question is coming out of that, other than a lot of people think you did very well last night. They also think you probably needed to hit it out of the park in order to overcome some of the stuff you've been dealing with. Do you think you did?
Oh, now that's not for me to say. I went up there hoping to represent, well, there are a lot of things, you know, as you said, it was a first in many respects, and I wanted to do honor and represent well all of the people who were counting on me, including our members. I wanted to be able to know that at the end of it, I had just done my best, and so I think that I did. I'm really grateful to the very young team of people that helped to prepare me. But I'll leave it for the pundits and the public, I guess, to decide how well I did.
I'll do one more on this and then we'll talk about your platform. But there was a moment in the debate last night where you and the Bloc Québécois leader had quite a frosty exchange where he seemed to think that you were insulting him and you tried to assure him that you weren't, but rather you were trying to open a door to have him educate himself on some of the issues that are of deep concern to you. Just, if you would, peel back the curtain a bit for us and tell us, did the two of you have a moment after the debate where you might have got together and kind of pursued that a bit?
Well, unfortunately, because of COVID restrictions, our arrivals and departures were staggered, and so there wasn't any opportunity like that. But certainly, you know, Steve, my approach has been for as long as I can remember, given the identities that I have, to always extend a hand in understanding. I don't assume ill will when I hear something objectionable. I offer to educate. And in this case, I think that there needs to be some understanding about the experience that those people like myself have had, both in politics, but also in relation to systems that unfortunately throw up unnecessary barriers. So I had extended that invitation to Mr. Blanchette on a number of occasions when these issues had come up, and it's an open invitation, and it really is extended in a gesture of goodwill and seeking to find that common ground.
Okay, moving on to talk about the platform. The Green Party doesn't have its name for nothing. Obviously, climate change is the issue for you. And I wonder if we could just start with this neutral, open-ended question. Why do you think your platform is better than the other parties as it relates to tackling climate change?
It's really in a class on its own. And I say that with a lot of I guess, really a heavy-heartedness, because it shouldn't be that way. The science is really clear about what we need to do. You know, for me, when I became, you know, when my eyes were opened, and I think a lot of people in Canada, they can point to the day or the time that their eyes were opened about the climate emergency. I went looking for a party that was offering the best policies on the climate. And for someone with my background, which is in policy analysis, it was really clear that it was the Greens, and it still is. We know for a fact, every party knows for a fact, that we cannot continue to bring online new fossil fuel projects. We cannot continue to explore for oil and gas. We can't continue to subsidize fossil fuels and have any hope of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions as quickly as we need to. And unfortunately, for the moment, the Green Party stands alone in that understanding and in policies that reflect it. And I think that that's the main thing that people in Canada should take away. We just can't do one thing if we're hoping to do the other.
I know you think you have an important story to tell, you and your party, as it relates to climate change. But I also hear other voices out there, for example, the Green Party leader, the former Green leader from British Columbia, as well as others, David Suzuki, for example, who believe the Liberals have a superior platform to you. Can you explain that?
I wasn't aware that Mr. Suzuki thought that. I know that he is supporting a variety of candidates from a variety of parties, including the Conservative Party. In the case of Mr. Weaver, I just have to respectfully and sincerely respectfully disagree with him. Our green recovery, our green future plank of our platform was put together by 5 climate scientists, all of them PhDs, and another one who has one on the way. And after extensive consultations with climate and environmental groups in this country and internationally. And I think that it reflects best practices and the gold standard in terms of what we need to do. There was just a report, Steve, yesterday in Nature that I saw on the BBC that said that this has got to be the peak decade for oil, that we need to keep at least 60% of the fossil fuels that are in the ground. And likely in regions like Canada, we need to stop extraction altogether if we're going to limit increases in global average temperatures.
You know, I'm going to fact check myself here. As I recall now, David Suzuki, I think, said the Liberal climate change plan was better than a New Democrats as opposed to yours. So let me correct that for the record right now, although he's very bullish on the Liberal plan. Now, let me ask you about this global climate supercomputer that is a part of your platform. What's that about?
This is why I love coming on your show, because we get to the policy, and there was just no time last night to get to the exciting policy ideas. So what we have been told by and when I say we, I mean the political class, by the scientific class, is that they simply have not been able to predict the kind of extreme weather and climate events that we have been seeing lately. And that was the case with the heat dome that settled over BC. It was the case with the extreme flooding that happened in Europe. They have said that the reason that they missed these things and they weren't able to warn us about them was that they didn't have the computational capacity to do it. And so they have said that for less than $1 billion, that they could develop a supercomputer to be used globally that would allow them to properly anticipate these events. And obviously, that is a fantastic investment. That is something that Canada could do, or at least lead. And that's where we should be looking to show global leadership.
I note that yours, I believe, is also the only platform that has, as one of its planks, a universal basic income. Why is that in there?
And this is our way. I will acknowledge that the NDP, while it wasn't part of their 2019 platform, they also have a section. It's very brief, but they do have a section recognizing the need for what we both call a guaranteed livable income. And so that's really exciting. And this is really what the Green Party does best of all, which is introduce policy ideas into the political discourse that eventually we build a consensus around. A guaranteed livable income is the thing that we need to replace all of these emergency benefits as they begin to wind down, in recognition of the fact that there were big gaps, which is why we needed these emergency benefits. It's the thing that allows us to make progress towards transitioning our economy without leaving anyone behind. The thing that allows us to recognize that the nature of work is changing, and that is going to also leave people behind. They need a strategy. And more than anything, it's a recognition that we can afford to ensure that everyone in Canada can live in dignity regardless of their circumstances, and that our patchwork system of programs simply hasn't achieved that.
How much would it cost? How would you fund it?
And there's more great news there. And again, loving the policy questions. The parliamentary budget officer he was asked to cost a guaranteed livable income, and he did it on the basis of the Ontario pilot program, which was unfortunately canceled by the current Conservative government. And what he found, Steve, was just good news, and it's the reason why there is this growing cross-party consensus around a guaranteed livable income. First, he found that a guaranteed livable income would lift about half of the people who are currently in poverty out of poverty. He also found that there was virtually no disincentive to work that would arise from a guaranteed livable income. And he also said that it was affordable, that I believe, I'm so nervous about quoting the exact amount. I want to say, I'm not going to quote it. Let's just say it was an expensive program, but one that he said that we absolutely could afford through consolidations of existing programs, through the cutting of administrative costs. And as we both know, much of the costs of our social programs is on the administrative side. So anything that we can do to simplify for people is going to save us a lot of money. So it's affordable, it's doable, it would lift a lot of people out of poverty, and it wouldn't create any issues for our labor market.
All right. As I set up the next question, which admittedly is going to be a bit of a long one, let's watch you at work last night in the leaders' debate, shall we?
A global issue. This is a national issue. This is a nonpartisan issue, and we have got to be able to come together across party lines. I said that I was available for a debate just on the climate because it's that important, but we've invited many times all of the parties to join us in a joint cabinet, a cross-party cabinet, to deal with this the way that we dealt with the pandemic, together. People were so inspired to see these leaders come together in the early days of the pandemic. We have got to bring that same approach here. Let's come together because that's what's needed.
Okay, I'm going to suggest, Annamie Paul, that last night at the leaders' debate was really, for very, very, very many Canadians, the first chance for them to actually see you in action. And I have been surprised by the number of people that I've spoken to during the course of this campaign who know nothing about you, even though you've been the leader for a good chunk of time. And, you know, you're on TV a lot. You're on the news a lot. Okay, why am I raising this? Because I think through the course of the campaign, we have been able to see those moments, and we saw some of them last night, where your party, the Liberal Party, the New Democratic Party, you know, if you put a Venn diagram up there, and maybe even the BQ on some things, there's some overlap. I mean, you progressives are all sort of swimming in the same lake trying to attract many of the same voters. So take this opportunity, if you would, and tell us what's the unique selling proposition of the Greens? Why would people want to vote for you as opposed to one of those other progressive parties?
First, that we are able to recognize and to celebrate the fact that we do have things in common. As you heard in that clip, there are many occasions when we have invited the other parties to participate in a cross-party cabinet focused on the climate emergency, because we know that that is the way that we can get action the quickest, by putting aside partisan concerns. And we have had no response from any of the parties for that. There are many times when on other progressive social policies, we have asked for unanimous consent, or we have asked for support for a particular declaration, and recognizing that we all agree. And we still haven't received it because, again, it would mean acknowledging that we had had a good idea. And so that is something that at least I can say I certainly bring, and I think our MPs have demonstrated as well. We have got to be able to work together across party lines on the issues that matter the most. Every single Green MP that is elected is someone who is committed to that. And that, in many ways, Steve, is the thing that is preventing the kind of quantum leap forward on social issues and on the climate that we need. The willingness to give other people credit, to celebrate the accomplishments of other parties, to acknowledge that no party has a monopoly on all of the good ideas, and that we can work together and that we're stronger together.
Okay, but if I'm sitting home watching this right now and I'm thinking to myself, I like what I'm hearing from the Greens, but I also see some stuff that the Liberals are doing that I'm okay with, and the NDP've got some good ideas as well. And who knows, maybe even Aaron O'Toole's got some things going on because he's running a more centrist campaign than previous Conservative leaders. And then I say to myself, yeah, but Annamie Paul's not going to be Prime Minister. So why should I vote for you when I know you're not going to be Prime Minister as opposed to one of the other parties?
Because every Green MP is an MP that is committed to representing their community, And that's important to say as well, because, you know, we've gotten very far away. We've strayed very far away from the way our system was designed, which is you elect an MP for a certain riding. They're there to represent the people who elected them, and that should be their primary focus. People who elect Greens can know that they're going to have a champion within their local community, and they can know that they have someone who is a champion of progressive values that is willing to work with others well in order to expedite our progress. Steve, you know, we have all of the policy solutions we need in order to tackle poverty, in order to tackle homelessness and affordable housing, in order to tackle the drug poisoning epidemic. And, you know, it was pointed out last night by the moderator that it seems like what is lacking is the political will to do so and the willingness to work with the other parties to get it done. So if we head back into a minority parliament in particular, every Green MP that is elected is someone you can count on to bring that spirit of collaboration to Parliament.
All right. Once again, I'm going to ask our viewers and our listeners on podcast to imagine the debate stage last night. And you were the only woman up there, obviously, but you were also the only person up there who didn't have a seat. And that takes me to my next area of questioning. You are running for personal election in Toronto Centre. You don't have a seat. You've run there before, unsuccessfully, although, admittedly, you improved the Green Party showing in the last by-election that was contested there quite significantly. You're also doing something, and here's the question. I don't think it's ever happened before, where a National Party leader spent the vast majority of her time in one riding. That's what you're doing. How come?
There are a couple of reasons. First, you know, I am in many ways a first. One of the ways in which I'm a first is that I was elected during the second wave of the pandemic, and we're now in the fourth wave of the pandemic. I'm in Ontario, where we had very, very severe restrictions, particularly in Toronto, and I just simply wasn't able to get out in the community other than virtually. And so this, Steve, has been really my first opportunity since becoming leader to actually connect with the people that I'm asking to trust me with their vote. And so that is something I have to earn, and that's really important. The other thing is, and you know, I try to, I mean, first there's no hiding it, but also it's important to acknowledge it. You know, we just entered this election not where we needed to be. We entered this election not as unified as we should have been, and that has had consequences as well. I want to, if I'm traveling to support our candidates, I want to make sure that it's helping them and not harming them, and that I'm not trailing our controversies with me into ridings that we could potentially win. So those are some of the considerations in terms of when I travel and how much I travel, and the carbon footprint. And I mean that.
Do you worry about leaving yourself open to the criticism that here's a National Party leader campaigning basically only in one riding? I know not exclusively, but basically. How can she get away with that?
Well, you know, this is one of the things that, beyond the fact that we're having this election in the first place, which is very disappointing, one of the other things that has really disappointed me in terms of the approach and the questions that I get asked about how we're doing things is that we seem to be not yet, but at least on the cusp of emerging from this pandemic without having taken many of the lessons that we should have. I had thought that we would have much more exposure in this election to modern campaigning techniques, things that weren't as heavy on a carbon footprint, things that created more authentic connections. But instead, what we see from all of the other parties is our leaders getting on their jumbo jets and then landing somewhere, and usually staying at the airport or taking a big bus to one location, making an announcement in front of their supporters, and then getting on the plane and doing it all over again. I don't know if just doing that actually creates a deeper connection with people. We want to bring some new techniques, some new ways of connecting with people. And as I said, in my case, I was elected at a time where, again, no one has been a leader under the kind of circumstances that I have. And so I have to do things differently. And if we want small parties to get people elected, then we have to give them the opportunity to do things differently.
Okay. For 90% of this interview, we've talked policy and we've talked some, you know, where the Greens are ideologically on the spectrum and so on. And now we get to the messy business here, the brass knuckles politics, which I've saved for the end. And you know, I'm not going to pretend for a second that I'm not going to pretend for a second that you're going to love this question, but Okay, there was an attempted coup within your party against your leadership, which is a pretty rough thing to do to a leader in the middle of an election campaign. And it was all brought on because of what has turned out to be a pretty significant disagreement within the Green Party on the issue of all things the Middle East, over which Canada has, precious little influence, frankly, related to other countries. Can you explain to us how, and I guess I should set this up by saying you're Jewish, which a lot of people will not know. How is it that the Green Party gets derailed, not over disagreements about climate change or taxation or basic income, but for goodness sakes, Middle East policy?
Well, first, I don't think that it should matter at all that I'm Jewish, because what should matter more is that I am a former diplomat, that I worked as an advisor in the Office of the Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court, and that I worked as a director for a leading global NGO focused on the prevention of death, the protection of civilians in cases of deadly conflict. Those are the things that guide my statements, that guide my approach to international affairs. And so, whether it was the flare-up in May in the Israel-Palestine situation, or any other global situation of conflict, my approach is going to be the same. It's going to be an approach that focuses on preventing death of civilians and de-escalation, which is what you need to prevent death of civilians. It's going to be focused on respect for the rule of law and international law. So I feel, as I always did, very comfortable with what I said and what my approach was, and I would have said it in any other situation, and I have said it in other situations of conflict.
Okay, let's do one more clip from last night's leaders' debate for setting up the last question here. Sheldon, if you would, from last night.
Being who I am and in this position has been incredibly hard. Being here tonight was not an obvious thing. I've had to crawl over a lot of broken glass to get here. I'm proud to be here. I'm proud to be the first of my kind. And because I am the first of my kind, I know that I won't be the last.
I'm sure that resonated with a lot of people who feel that, they've got all kinds of ceilings that they've got to crack through in order to participate more fully in this society. What did you mean, though, when you said I'm the first of my kind?
I'm the first woman of color. Well, I'm the first woman of color. I'm the first Black person. I'm the first Jewish woman to be in this role. That's a lot of firsts. And I always say that, I may have said that to you, Steve, before, that I shouldn't represent so many firsts in politics after all this time. I think I'm only the fifth woman to be elected the leader of a major national party, a party with seats in parliament. Only the fifth in the history of our confederation. We still have parties like the Liberal Party who have never had a woman or a person of color lead them at all. And so I do again want to say in this position that it is incredibly difficult. It has been an eye-opener, Steve, how incredibly difficult it is, how many barriers are thrown up against you. It is definitely not at all obvious that I would have arrived here. It has taken a small village of people to give me the strength to go on much of the time. And I thought that I was savvy. I thought that I knew what I was getting into. So I made it this far, and the fact that I have done that means that it can't be undone. And my hope is that it will be easier for the next person, and that there will be more and more and more diversity on the leader stage going forward.
Well, as I say to all the leaders who will come in here for an interview, we thank you for your time. We wish you well on the campaign trail, and stay safe out there. Thanks to Annamie Paul, the leader of the Greens.
Thank you so much for having me, as always.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.